That is why my voice sounds a little bit different. I'm in audiobook mode, going through a different setup, directly into the computer, no compression, no EQ, no fanciness. So you might hear some stuff that you didn't hear before, and you might not hear some things that you did hear. What? You got to be kidding me. Are you serious? Are you serious? Come here. Come here. Come here. All right. I was just joined by my codependent dog. What are you doing, man? Huh? You gonna give me something? Go, ow. No? All right. It's too bad this mic won't pick you up. All right, have a seat. Have a seat. Or don't. Just leave. Whatever. It's up to you. I've got to record this episode, man. I've only done like 7 of them last year.
This is the Red Podcast.
It's David Hooper, back in the air chair. Red Podcast, the marketing podcast for experts. How depressing is it that I only had 7 Red Podcast episodes last year? It's not like I wasn't doing anything else. I had maybe 150, 200 of my other podcasts, Build a Big Podcast, several dozen of the broadcast show, Music Business Radio. But Red got neglected, and that is not going to happen from here on out. I already have several episodes already in the can. I've interviewed some amazing people. I'm going to bring some other voices in for Red to show you how people are marketing their messages, how they're building their expert businesses, making more money, attracting audiences, all the things that I talk about here on Red Podcast. I'm bringing in other opinions, other thoughts, other ways of doing things to help you do that with your expert business. Before we get into that, because it is a new decade, kind of, depending on how you count decades, definitely a new year, I wanted to do an episode about what can happen in 10 years. I think a lot of times we look at the new year as 1 year. We've got this new opportunity to do something. We've got 12 months to do it. And I've heard this said, I think this is really interesting, that we overestimate what we can do in a day, but underestimate what we can do in a year. But if you're like a lot of people, this year, you're like me. You look back on last year and you say, what? 7 episodes? That's it? Yeah, sometimes it catches up on you because you're busy doing other things. I wanted to expand upon that for this episode and talk about the last 10 years of what has happened with me, my business, my life. It's somewhat personal, but I hope that it is something you will be able to relate to. And I'm sharing this because if you have no idea where you want to go, you likely end up in one of 2 places. One, not going anywhere. It's super easy to piss away time, opportunity, to miss things that you could have done or should have done maybe because you're doing something else. Or 2, going somewhere random. That's what happens when you say yes to random things without thought or purpose. So what I want to do with this episode is give you some ideas about where things can go for you over the next few years, as well as thoughts about how different things can be if you want to go in a different direction than you are now. And I think even if you're going in a direction that's generally correct and on track, little tweaks that we can make are going to help us to get to our goals easier, help us enjoy life more, make more money, have more free time, have better relationships. It's usually the little things that get us. We have a tendency to blow things way out of proportion. For example, getting in the studio and doing a podcast. Like, not tonight. I'm exhausted. I don't want to do it tonight. But once you get in there, not so bad, right? Not if it's something that you like to do. Same thing for writing a book. Same thing for any of the projects that you're working on. I feel that procrastination and what we do with our mind, we make things out to be way more than they actually are. I knew a guy once, he would say, inch by inch, life is a cinch. That was his motto. And it's kind of cheesy and funny. I kind of laugh about it now. But it's true. It's true. Inch by inch, life is a cinch. So let's talk about it. I want to go back 10 years and tell you where I was. 10 years ago, business-wise, I was still running musicmarketing.com. I had a podcast. I had the broadcast radio show, both of those things about the music business. And at that time, I was about 5 years into the broadcast show. The podcast, it was called Music Marketing Podcast, and we did it on Blog Talk Radio. Blog Talk Radio has such a bad reputation among podcasters, but it was a live call-in show where I would get with my co-host, Wendy, and we would take calls. That wasn't the only way that you could have done it. I had some equipment where I could have done it on a standard phone line, whatever, but it was the easiest. And one of the great things about it was that as I was answering questions, she would screen the calls, she would get the question, she would introduce the guest to me. Hey, David, we've got Bill from Boise, Idaho. He's an independent musician. He plays folk music. He has a question about selling CDs from the stage. I'd say, hey, Bill, welcome. Let me know more about what you're doing. And she would intro him, set the thing up, give me an idea of what he wants to talk about, kind of frame the question for him so he wouldn't ramble on. And I was able to ask him direct questions. He was able to give me the answers. I was able to give him the information that he needed. So side note, if you want to do a call-in show, and I think they're great, and there's much better ways of doing them now than there were then, although Blog Talk Radio, it still exists in some form. There's other options that'll let you do that kind of thing. That's a great way to do it. Have a co-host, somebody to screen the calls. Make it a Q&A. While you're answering questions or talking with somebody, the co-host is taking other calls. Another thing I was doing at this time, I was working on my book, not the one I just released called Big Podcast, but one that would eventually become a book called Six Figure Musician. That book was the beginning of the end for me as far as the music industry. It was about a 4-year project. I mentioned to you that I'd started the business in 1995. I was a musician before that, and I'd put in my time. What I wanted to do with the book was to put all that knowledge, or as much as I could, in one place so I didn't leave people hanging. I had a lot of people following me. They'd been with me for a long time, and I didn't want to leave them without something to get them to the next step. Put it in a book, and it was in writing that book, promoting that book in the initial stages when I was promoting it, that got me looking about where I had been and thinking about where I was going, what the business was like at that time compared to what the business was like in 1995 when I started. What I realized was that the business I had started wasn't the one that I was in. Things had changed, and I had changed. I remember back in 1995 when I just started, I was working on some pretty big projects. There was a No Doubt project, Bush was happening at the time, some bands that you would have heard of, and I had heard of them. I was aware of them. They were going places, even when I was working with them. And I was really excited. I was like, yeah, this is it, man. This is what I thought the business would be like. And some of the people that I was working with, it was like a widget to them. They didn't care if it was No Doubt or Bush or any of the other acts we were working with. It could have been anything. It could have been a Sandy Patty album. It could have been a new type of sausage. They just wanted something to sell. And coming into the business as a musician, music was very precious to me. I would think, don't these guys get it? This is huge. This is huge. I mean, I was in my early 20s, and it was part of the culture, man. You know? It was bands that you had seen come up as independent, and now they had a major deal, and I was part of it, you know? Not getting them the deal, but of marketing and helping them to maintain the deal and sell records. Anyway, I was thinking back to that, and I realized that 15 years later, I had become one of those people that I was trying not to become, and thought that I never would become. Thinking about that and having the opportunity to do that through the book and just being where I was in the industry, I realized it was time to move on, even though I wasn't quite sure what that would look like. So as soon as the book was done, did 4 or 5 months of promoting it, but not really. Eventually I walked away from everything, with the exception of the broadcast show, Music Business Radio, which I'm still doing. I was very fortunate in that a lot of the work that I had done, music and otherwise, a lot of the other marketing projects that I had been part of, because I've worked with books, movies, other things, you do the work once and you get a little piece of it. So I was getting royalties coming in and residual income, and that gave me some breathing room. But the downside of that, I don't know that you could really understand this unless you've been through it. And that's actually one of the guys that I'm going to bring here on Red Podcast. I know several people that they've made money from selling a business, or they've made money from cryptocurrency, or maybe they won the lottery, or maybe they were like me and that something hit and they continue to get royalties from it. Unless you've been there, I don't know that you understand the double-edged sword that is. It is so easy to slack off and to get out of shape when you don't have something motivating you. I know a lot of guys that they're making money hand over fist, and somehow they still manage to get up at 5 a.m. and they still got that drive. But that's a double-edged sword too. I don't want to be one of those guys, because those guys are scared. They can't relax. They never relax. They're always worried about losing something. And then you got the guys like me or some of these other people that you come into some money, or you've got something that makes you comfortable, and you've got this breathing room, and what you think is going to be maybe a month, maybe 2 or 3 months, it ends up being a year or 5 years or 10 years or the rest of your life. That's kind of scary. Because as I mentioned, being a musician, I kind of transitioned into the music industry. I knew what I wanted to do. It was special to me. It was precious. And I didn't have that anymore. So I was like, what am I going to do now? And previously, I'd looked at guys who have been through that. I'm like, what the just do something. It's easy. Just get up and do something. And then it hit me, and I realized that it wasn't so easy. I had a lot more empathy and compassion for those guys. So that's been one of the things that I've done over the last decade. I'll talk more about that in a minute. I know it sounds like a first world problem, and maybe it is when you've got money coming in without really doing a lot. But the truth is, while that gives you options, it also makes it difficult to keep moving forward. I really like sometimes not having options. I think it makes your decision making easier. You know, Apple, they changed their business model when they stopped giving people options. If you've been a Macintosh user for a long time, way back in the day, I'm talking about, 95, 96, when I was starting my company, they had all these different types of Macs. They had towers, they had books, and they had stuff like the 4600 or the 4700, and it wasn't really clear what you were getting. And Apple was sinking. Steve Jobs wasn't in the company. He came back. You know what he did? He made it real simple. We got a tower. We got this thing called an iMac. Pick your color, but you're going to get an iMac. You want one fast or maybe a little slower? That's your only decision. You get an iMac. That's the desktop we have for the average person. You want a book, notebook? You want more memory or less memory? That's your only decision. He made it really simple. He had a tower, he had a desktop, he had a laptop. Didn't give you hundreds and hundreds of decisions, weird configurations, and that kind of thing. And the business blew up. Go into a Chipotle. They do this. They say, what do you want? You want a bowl or you want it wrapped up in a tortilla? One decision. You want a meat on it? You want what they call sofritas, the vegan meat. You want beans? 2 types of beans. Rice? 2 types of rice. They make decision-making very simple for you. They go to Cheesecake Factory. They give you this big-ass thing. Looks like old-school World Book encyclopedias. Man, big. They got everything. People can't make decisions as easy. Anyway, so all that to say that sometimes options can be a very frustrating thing. If you've ever wondered why rock musicians disappear or completely self-destruct after a big hit, this is related to that. You come into all this money, you come into all these options, and paralysis sets in. You don't know what to do because you can't go back to what you were doing. Time has moved on. You've moved on. You're a different person. Trends have changed. You can't do the same thing. But what are you going to do next? It's why guys who sell a company for big money are never heard from again. How come those guys disappear? Is it because they just got lucky? Maybe. Or is it the paralysis that stops them, or at least hinders them, from doing what they want to do next? I think there's a real advantage to not having options, or at least unlimited options. Not having options forces you into action. You can reject that action, which is fine, but at least you're forced to do something. Otherwise, you sit there and die. Aristotle talked about this. He said, a man being just as hungry as thirsty and placed in between food and drink must necessarily remain where he is and starve to death. You might have heard the fable of the mule. He's got 2 piles of food. Can't decide which one he wants to eat. So he starves to death. Personally, going back to 2010, my housing situation was a mess. In 2007, I'd moved into a new place, and it was amazing. So cool. Rooftop deck. I thought I had made it. But that quickly turned on me. The bottom line being that I was in a legal dispute for 5.5 years over that property. I want to focus on moving forward, but I'm telling you this to set up the story. So without going into too many details, I was dealing with dozens of contractors, attorneys, the codes department, tons of people. Actually, I will give you one detail. The codes department came over for an inspection one time, and this is while I was living there, and as they were looking at the electrical system, the circuit box literally caught on fire. How is that for irony? Anyway, a complete chaotic time. It's the biggest purchase of your life, and you think that everything is going to be great. You've done it. You got this place that you can bring people over to, and they're going to be so impressed, and they're going to be amazed. I mean, okay, I'll give you another story. All right, I got broken into the first day I was in it. I guess people knew I was moving in. I don't know. Anyway, I got broken into the first day I was there, and the cops showed up. The guy's like, "What do you do?" I mean, it was like that kind of thing. You know what I mean? And it makes you feel really good. You're like, yeah, I'm whatever I was 35 at the time, and you're feeling like, man, you know, I've done it, man. I've made it. But not really. I mean, the outside is always different from the inside, and that's what I talk about here on Red. You can have this outward-facing persona of having it all together, and you're making all this money, and you're doing great, and you've got a beautiful wife and great kids. But inside, man, you're dying because you've got those choices like we're talking about, or you've got work that's unfulfilling. And that's one of the reasons that I talk about this stuff on this podcast, because there's so much more to it than having these outward expressions of success. It's about having that internal thing. And when you've got that, you don't care where you are. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. We'll get there. Relationship-wise, you know, speaking of where I was and where I am now, 2010, I wasn't seeing anybody that I can remember. And if you were seeing me and you happen to be listening to this, I apologize. But if you were seeing me then in 2010, you know that I wasn't a great person to date. So maybe this isn't a surprise to you. A related side note, I don't have a lot of regrets. I don't know that I really have any regrets, but if I had to go back in life and I had to do things over again, relationships are something that I would do differently. I had really big walls up, and I wasn't even aware of them. So because of that, I missed some great opportunities for growth, for fun. I hurt a lot of people by basically shutting down on them. I wasn't a jerk, like abusive or anything, but it's like dating a professional mannequin. No emotion, there's no feeling, just somebody who's dead inside. And that's what I was. You can do that when you're lacking awareness. I think for people around me, it probably wasn't so easy. I was making good money, as I mentioned. I had free time. I had autonomy. Cool place, despite it catching on fire and the roof falling in and a number of other things. But eventually, living like that and the work that I had done to get those things, it worked for me for a time, but it got to the point that it wasn't working for me. And I realized that I wanted something different. I didn't know what that was, but I knew where I wasn't where I wanted to be and wasn't where I wanted to end up. That was something that, as I mentioned a minute ago, I never thought that would happen to me. I saw it happen to other people, and I was like, what the hell, man? You should be grateful for all this, and all this stuff is going your way, and all this stuff is going my way. But it got to the point where it was just, you know, it wasn't working for me. The result of that was that I became a better person because I became less judgmental. I was understanding other people better. I was able to connect with people in a way that I hadn't been able to connect with them before. And I think that's when everything just started tumbling down. Once those walls come down, Leonard Cohen has a song. He said, the cracks are how the light gets in. So I had these cracks, and that was how the light got in. And wow, there's a lot that I've been missing. And it's hard in a way because you've got to feel and you've got to look at yourself and you've got to make changes, but it's amazing and so much better than what you had before. Anyway, let me get up to the present time. And this is what I hope will be, I guess, a more inspiring part of this episode here. I've solidified my direction. I've doubled down on doing what I like, and I've ditched, for the most part, what I don't like. Still a work in progress. It's not perfect, but I'm moving in the right direction. And that is how I treat life. I talked about that earlier. I think as long as we're moving in the right direction, we can make little bitty tweaks. That's so much easier than going in the wrong direction and having to turn that big ass ship around. Right direction is where I want to be. It doesn't have to be perfect. That also eases up a lot of the pressure that you feel on yourself when you have that kind of attitude. It's no, I just want to be in the right direction. It doesn't have to be perfect, but let's get in and play with it. Because sometimes going in the right direction, if you had the perfect direction, you get in there and you find out that it's not perfect. And here's why I think that works. You probably have an idea of where you want to go in life, relationships, money, health, but you don't know exactly the direction until you actually jump in. So by having this attitude of, I'm going to get on the right direction, not the perfect direction, you can get in there, have fun with it, play around, maybe experience some things that you didn't know existed that are going to make that direction better, clearer, more perfect. That's what I've been doing over the last few years. The only music business stuff that I'm doing right now is a radio show on the topic. I'm not actively looking for musician clients or doing the kind of music marketing work that I've done in the past. But this is what I'm talking about the right direction. Initially, I thought, screw this. I'm out of the music business. And having that space from it, it makes you reconnect with it. There was a reason why you were there in the first place. It's because I love music, man. I was a musician. And having that space, it's made me appreciate music more. It's made me appreciate musicians more. The people that I've worked with over the years and the people that I still work with, amazing people. They're good people. I just wasn't seeing it because I was too close. I think having that space has been huge. I used to be an all or nothing guy, 100% or zero. If I was going to start a workout, I was going to do it 7 days a week, 5 days a week, 6 days a week. That doesn't cut it. 7 days a week or nothing. When I played guitar, 7 days a week playing guitar. If I had to miss a day, well, forget it. Wasn't going to do it. If I couldn't go pro, forget it. I'm not going to do it as a hobby. I think having some of that in-between space, really just forgiving myself and letting me fool around with it, it's made me better. It's not only been more fun, but it's made me better because I can jump in it, realize that I don't have to do things at such an extreme level. I can enjoy them more. And because of that, I'm more effective than I would have been. To sum it up, basically what I'm saying is this. I'm not forcing things. And that was huge, huge. The other thing I've been doing over the last few years is I've been actively working on trusting more and not being attached to outcomes. And that's not to say that I don't go after what I want, but if there are red flags along the way, I don't ignore them, or I try not to. I think we have a way of overlooking things that don't match our belief systems. What are you doing? Are you going to come in here? All right. I was just joined my codependent dog again. Are we going to make this a thing? Huh? All right. I cut you out of the first one. Now, okay. Just chill there. It's a work in progress. And actually, this is what I'm talking about. It's going with it, man. I hear the dog outside my studio and he wants to come in and hang with me. All right, man, come on in. I don't know if you can hear him. You're going to say, all right, I don't know if the mic got that, but that was a good one. Here's my current situation. I am married now. Never thought it would happen. I knew I would have my opportunity, but I wasn't really interested in it. Got a great partner. She calls me on my BS, which is amazing. I think it's great to have somebody who can do that, but also at the same time, know that you've got somebody that has your back. That has been so huge for me. Housing, great situation. I built a studio in my house. That sounds fancy. Maybe it is. People look at it like, oh, damn. It took a walk-in closet, had an electrician trick it out, put in some lights, put in the recording equipment. Outside of this studio, my wife, who works as a photographer, she's been going along kind of the same path that I have over the last few years. So that's been great. She's got this studio right outside the door, and it's been amazing what she's been able to do. She was in photography for a long time, branched out into the business world, and you may remember her. She was the co-host of the original podcast. That's why we started this podcast, to help her build a bigger audience for the book that she was writing. She kind of, had that same kind of music business kind of thing that I did. She's like, this isn't working for me. So she bailed on it, went back into photography, and it's going great guns. She just brought in a ton of great equipment. She's got a big photo shoot tomorrow for a great national brand. And it's amazing what that has done. I think when you follow what it is that you want to do and you have fun with it and you're easy to work with and you're not a jerk and you're open-minded, it sounds so trite, and I know you've probably heard it from a million people. It took me till I was in my 40s to kind of figure it out. I mean, I believed it on one level, and I was doing what I wanted to do. I started my business in college, and I've done more or less what I've wanted to do my entire life. But I think there's another level of that, which is what I've been able to find over the last few years. I'm working with some great people now. My work right now has been amazing. I'm doing more than just music business. In a lot of ways, what I do is the same, because I'm working with people who have really big messages. They've got something that they want to share. Like musicians, they also have recorded information. Like musicians, they also have live events. Like musicians, they might have some kind of media component. And it's been amazing to be part of that. Not only, I think, just to help people spread important messages, but to, I guess, flex my skill set and just change things up with me as far as I'm a marketing person. We're not living and dying by charts necessarily. We're really focusing, I think, more on the message than, some musicians do that. Some do, but it's easy to get caught up in charts or licensing and all this other stuff because you've got so many people on the payroll in the music industry. Like songwriters need to get paid, and they get paid a certain way. And the person who owns the master tapes, the sound recording, they get paid a certain way, and the musician gets paid a certain way, and the hired guns who work for the musician, the touring acts, they get paid a certain way. Anyway, it's been more of a lean, mean machine working with experts, people who own the content, people who do the content, people who are probably more in charge of their own careers than a lot of the musicians that I've worked with. The main guys, the guys you would know, they are somewhat in charge of their own careers. But, the sidemen and writers and stuff, you're really relying on other people to get your songs cut, get your songs placed, hire you for the band that goes out on the road. And sometimes there's some stuff that's out of your control, where the big, creative decisions and the marketing decisions, that comes from the head guy. And I'm working more with the head guys now than I ever have. What's been interesting is that coming from this music industry background, at first, when I decided to ditch the industry, that's strong, to move away from the music industry. I thought I was ditching it at first. I wasn't going to mention music stuff, but if you've listened to Red Podcast, I talk about it all the time, and that's my real unique skill set. I've embraced that, saying, we used to do this for this band or this act, the people in these industries. We could do the same thing in your industry. And in your industry, they've never seen it before, but I know it works because I've seen it proven. And the same basic fundamental concept that got them where they needed to go is going to get you where you needed to go. I've been working on doing that, bringing those kind of elements into new markets, working with different people. Upcoming for the new year, we're going to talk about the future. I'm having a bigger emphasis on partnerships right now. One of the things that can make any expert great is a unique combination of skills that I just mentioned. So for me personally, it's music industry, comedy, film and TV, entertainment business, plus working with experts. But what I want to do is expand on that by bringing other people into the fold. Unique combinations can happen in any number of ways. I'm doing that on the podcast by bringing in more guests. I'm doing that with my business partnerships. I've got a few things being put together. I will announce them here shortly. Very exciting. I didn't know if I was ever going to be excited like this again. It's almost like starting the business again when you have this fresh outlook on things. Back in 1995, I'm still in college. It's like, yeah, man, we're going to do this thing. You've got all the energy. It gets to the point where you're working in the grind. You're like, God, I don't know if I've got this in me. Did I just get lucky? That was a question that I asked myself. Do I still have the energy to start something from scratch? Well, got on that right direction, fine-tuned it, and here I am. I've got all of it, and I'm super excited. I'm looking for more, by the way, as far as those partnerships. If you have something that you think I would be a good match for, I'm trying to be more open to collaboration. I'm trying to be more open to really new opportunities, not just thinking something has to be a certain way. So if you've got something, reach out to me. bigpodcast.com is how to do that. One of the things I'm considering, by the way, speaking of partnerships, we'll call it a partnership, is doing a co-hosted podcast. And I've talked to a couple of guys about doing this, possibly a couple of guys at once, maybe doing a three-person podcast. I don't know if you call that a panel, but a three-way podcast, not just the standard two. That may be happening. More episodes of Red Podcast in this upcoming year. As I mentioned, I've got 6 or 7 interviews already in the can. I've got some others lined up. I've got some great stuff for you, man. This is stuff that, it's like I said, I've worked in different industries, and if you listen to a lot of business-oriented podcasts, you tend to hear the same people being interviewed again and again and again. In my experience and connections, that's enabling me to reach out to people, get in contact with them, see opportunities, and bring people to you that you might not have thought of, and they are doing things you might not have thought of, but I know they're going to help you. That is coming up. I've definitely fallen off the wagon over the last year, 7 episodes, kind of embarrassing. Part of that was just not having the clear direction and focus, the things that I've been talking about. I didn't know where this podcast fit in to what I was doing. I knew it fit in some way, but as I've said, that's just the right direction. I knew there was something to it, but I didn't know exactly what that was going to be. Now I'm way more clear. You will see me on the road this year. I've already got a couple of speaking engagements lined up. Actually, more than that. I've got one booked for tonight, in fact. Coming to a town near you. I know I've got another book in me. I'm currently doing research on that. And finally, I talked about recording the audiobook at the very beginning of this episode. That book is called Big Podcast, and that will be out in the next month or so. It took me a while to get it like I wanted it, but trust me, it will be worth the wait. If you're interested in any of these things, if you want to reach out to me, bigpodcast.com is the website. And if you go to bigpodcast.com/subscribe, you will get on the list to get the book, to get some of these specialty podcasts that I've been releasing that aren't just for experts. They're how to do something very specific for experts. bigpodcast.com/subscribe. That's it in a nutshell. Thank you for sticking it out with me. I know this was a different type of episode. I'm curious to know what your goals are for the new year, how you've changed over the last decade. Do reach out to me. The easiest way to do that, bigpodcast.com. Thank you for sticking it out with Red. I promise you, more than 7 episodes this new year, and they're going to be good. My dog is asleep on the floor at my feet. So for him and for me, have a great one, and we'll see you on the next episode.